Dr. Shashi Tharoor ji.
Thank you, Speaker Sahab. I was just saying that in her own speech, the Finance Minister reminded us that these days cricket is very much on all of our minds. I'm not referring, unfortunately, to the disappointing defeat in Chennai yesterday, but earlier this year, we witnessed an Indian cricket miracle in Brisbane in the face of impossible odds, which 9 star members of the team absent or injured, with the bowling backbone of the team hobbled and unable to play, and the inspirational captain absent, India pulled off one of the greatest of all cricketing victories. I was hoping, as the Finance Minister herself suggested, for something similar from this year's budget. The impossible odds were there. The economy had been laid low ever since demonetisation, and then shattered by the pandemic and the resultant lockdown. The star performers like tourism and service industries were devastated. The backbone of the economy, agriculture and MSMEs, are both in crisis. But alas, there was no stirring fight back in the Finance Minister's speech, no come-from-behind victory for our economy. Instead of the focused leadership we all expected from the government, it became clear, listening to the Finance Minister, that here, alas, inspirational captaincy is wholly absent. Instead, we have had the usual combination of high rhetoric, grand ambition, exaggerated numbers, and unrealistic targets, all diluted with underwhelming allocations to crucial sectors. Our Finance Minister neither played with a defensive bat nor hit the ball out of the park. Instead, alas, it seems she was comprehensively stumped, or maybe she had just run out of ideas. Instead of the Brisbane heroics, we just got a Chennai collapse. Through the course of the Honourable Finance Minister's address, we heard a lot of memorable quotes, notably from Tagore. But as the great Gurudev himself said, you cannot cross the sea merely by staring at the water. It is perhaps a more apt way to describe this government's tepid budget. Rather than help us cross the sea of challenges we currently face, the reality, sadly, is that this budget abdicates the government's responsibilities to the weakest in our society, the segments of our economy that are in tatters, and the Aam Aadmi who have reposed their faith in this government have been let down totally in the last 7 years. I could spend hours explaining why this is so, but given the limited time available to my party, let me stick to a few examples, and I'll pick 4 today, where the budget has betrayed the most fundamental expectations from the nation: health, fiscal stimulus, defence and agriculture. First, health. Given the unexpected challenges we have collectively faced since last year, which has destroyed both lives and livelihoods, the people of our country expected revolutionary allocations for healthcare. While thanks to the countless sacrifices of our healthcare warriors, our frontline workers, researchers, scientists, doctors, we are now in a position where the light may finally be visible at the end of the tunnel, but the budget has delivered a blow to our hopes of expanding and developing the healthcare ecosystem of our country. Sadly, the government, in its peculiar wisdom, has chosen the path of deception rather than mature governance. We all initially praised the Finance Minister's declaration of a 137% increase in the healthcare budget, which included big-ticket schemes like the Pradhan Mantri Atmanirbhar Swasthya Yojana, Swasthya Bharat Yojana, 64,000 crores, a total outlay of 2,23,000 crores in this budget year compared to 94,000 in the last one, a substantial increase. But when we turn to the annex, as instructed by our own Finance Minister, the deception lying in store was breathtaking. Out of these claimed allocations, 35,000 crores is just a one-time expenditure for the ongoing COVID-19 vaccination program. Another 60,000 crores actually for the Department of Drinking Water and Sanitation. So as a result of this, of the 2,23,846 crores mentioned by the Honourable Finance Minister, the actual allocation to the Department of Health and Family Welfare was only 71,269 crores, which marked not a 137% increase, but a decline of nearly 7,000 crores, or 10.84% decline when compared to the RE estimates for the same financial year. Together, not only are these paltry allocations a reversal of the government's own promise to the nation of increasing healthcare expenditure to 2.5% of our GDP by 2025, but they constitute an unconscionable betrayal of the countless sacrifices of our healthcare and frontline workers at the height of the pandemic. Second, the fiscal stimulus. Our nation suffered, as we know, serious economic hardship thanks to the stringent lockdown. We still remember the misery faced by our most economically vulnerable people. We remember the lakhs of migrant workers heart-rendingly trudging home with parched throats and calloused feet. Yet the government's response then and in this budget has shown no sensitivity to their plight. Given the flailing state of the economy and the unprecedented losses suffered by the majority of this country, we expected a budget that would offer a comprehensive fiscal stimulus to all those affected, to key industries, particularly our MSMEs, the backbone of the economy, and the informal sector. Similarly, we demanded increased government expenditure and at the same time an effort to put money in the hands of the people by boosting employment and livelihood generation. Nothing of the sort has happened. Instead of boosting funding, the government has either bizarrely slashed funds or offered deceptive programs that focus on liquidity rather than direct fiscal support. Let's face it, providing cheaper credit to businesses will be of little value unless consumption demand increases. But demand won't increase until people have money to spend. Yet no real money has been provided and no means of earning money. Funding for key schemes like Manrega, the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, have been slashed in that scheme by 35%. The same applies to Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana. Support for key sectors like the MSMEs I mentioned is largely absent. Your so-called support for MSMEs, ma'am, relies on allocations for meaningless exercises like the Guarantee Emergency Credit Line, which is only to provide collateral-free loans to MSME businesses and not direct fiscal support. The fact is that the tourism and hospitality industries have perhaps been the worst affected. They're in crisis, they're near collapse. But your budget, instead of coming to their rescue, has instead simply slashed the overall allocation of funds to this sector by 19%. In fact, if you look at the revised estimates for the year, they've slashed them by 45%. We heard the finance minister last week and the prime minister today repeatedly invoking Atmanirbhar Bharat. Well, Bharat should be Atmanirbhar, not Bharatvasis. Your Atmanirbharta should not mean that you're telling your own citizens, you're on your own, be self-reliant, the government will do nothing for you. That is not the kind of Atmanirbharta this country needs. Third, defense. The deceptive announcements in healthcare were complemented by a complete inability of this government to walk the talk in matters of national security and defense, especially given the unexpected clashes with China over the course of last year, that no doubt caught our own government by surprise, perhaps given how very much they had hyped the PM's purported rapport with his Chinese counterpart. Instead, we have a government minister helping the Chinese make the case that they are more sinned against than sinning, part of the government's efforts to underplay the crisis after the Prime Minister claimed no territory had been lost. This government has a duty to ensure that our armed forces are safe and well supported and that they have all the tools and resources they need to keep aggressors at bay, not to pretend that there is no problem when we know there is. I'm shocked that the Honourable Finance Minister did not even mention the word defence in her speech. We really expected from this government an effort to support our long-pending modernisation and acquisition programs. But despite all the chest-thumping and sloganeering about the supposed 18.5% increase in capital outlays, the numbers show us clearly that in matters of national security, the government's talk of nationalism is hollow. It's full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. The capital outlay allocation, rupees 1.35 lakh crores, is only 0.4% higher than the 2020 2021 revised estimates of 1.34 crores. Just the previous year, before Galwan, the Defence Committee of this Parliament had recommended a 35% increase. Where is 35% and where is 0.4%? Despite all the deafening proclamations by its members, this government, even in the face of such grave threats as we're facing now, has kept the proportion of capital expenditure to the overall defence budget at 25%, far smaller compared to the UPA era, because our government consistently had it at 30 to 32%. It's a matter of shame for all members of this House that we have a government that has repeatedly proven incapable of offering any considerable financial support to our armed forces at a time when the threat of a two-front war has grown dramatically. To use one of their favorite words, this is truly anti-national. Fourth example, Mr. Chairman, agriculture. In these last few months, with rising agricultural distress, compounded by the undemocratic passage of 3 farm bills with widespread adverse ramifications for the agrarian economy, we have witnessed nationwide protests by farmer groups whose very survival is at stake. Even as the government in their obduracy failed to engage constructively with the farmers, one hoped that at least the budget would take cognizance of their distress and offer tangible measures to address and alleviate their current plight. No such luck here in this budget. Shastri ji gave us the slogan, Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan. Modi ji's contribution to this budget is Na Jawan, Na Kisan. Now, we must recognize that the current nationwide protests led by peaceful farmers who've been unconscionably sidelined by the undemocratic farm bills reflects only the tipping point. But the rot in the sector has been prevalent for a long time thanks to this government's myopic approach, which continues in the current budget. The overall budget of the department saw a minuscule increase of 5% from last year's revised estimates, but was 8% below the budget allocated last year. Similarly, despite the government's assurances, the budget does little to assuage the fear of the farmers regarding MSP. The two schemes that ensure MSP, Market Intervention Scheme and Price Support Scheme, and Pradhan Mantri Annadata Aay Sanrakshan Yojana, have witnessed consecutive reductions in the last 2 years, leading to a 20 to 25% cut in this year's budget. I heard the Prime Minister mention MSP. I didn't hear him mention a quarter of the budget for it has been cut. Much was made by this government about the flagship PM Kisan scheme just before the elections, as you may remember. But despite being one of the major direct cash transfer schemes and therefore in direct need of a rise in allocation, the scheme has witnessed a 10,000 crore rupee drop of 13%, in other words, in its allocation. The disbursal amount of 6,000 crores under 6,000 rupees per farmer under PM Kisan has not been enhanced either, nor has the scheme been extended to tenant farmers, sharecroppers, women farmers, Adivasi farmers, who've all been excluded from this benefit from the start. Instead, no, it's true. Instead, 2,326 crores was transferred to 40 lakh ineligible beneficiaries. This is from the government's own figures. Even the previous head of Aadhaar said that he received the PM Kisan payment for which he was not entitled. So Sudboots are receiving the government's money, but what are the farmers getting? Even worse is the plight of the fishermen. In my own constituency, Mr. Chairman, I've seen them devastated by Cyclone Oki, the floods of 2018 and 2019, and now the pandemic. But this budget has not only denied them any relief, let alone a special relief package. There is nothing in the budget in terms of fiscal support, diesel subsidies, lower GST, nothing. Fish nets and fishing equipment even they have to buy at the price they paid before the pandemic and before all these calamities. You've given relief to tea garden workers in Assam and Bengal, where you believe the ruling party has a chance. But you've ignored thousands of tea workers in Tamil Nadu and Kerala. And I think we can understand why, but is this fair? Frankly, sir, we are looking at a very sad situation. उच्च वर्ग के गिने चुने कुछ व्यापारी को फायदा है, मुल्क चलाने को बतलाओ, ये भी कोई कायदा है? Anyway, at a time of unprecedented civil, political, economic distress in our country, this government had a great chance to show us that it was willing to bring this country back together. That was precisely what we expected from the union budget, a platform through which this government could actually display a bold vision for reviving the economy and offering much-needed relief to our citizens who have had to face one of the most challenging periods in contemporary history. Instead, our citizens have been left thoroughly disappointed by the government's repeated mediocrity in matters of policy making. This tepid budget ignored the middle class in their hour of need. You have given them extortionate tax increases and fuel prices. Since 2014, the excise duty on petrol has gone up by 348%. On diesel, the excise duty has gone up by 894%. Soon, banks will have to provide not just car loans, but fuel loans, Mr. Chairman, so you can buy fuel for the cars, thanks to the taxes that this government has put up. The truth is, there has been no relief in tax rates for the middle class either. पूंजीपतियों को सब्सिडी मिली, अमीरों को रिबेट, मिडिल क्लास वालों टीवी देखो, तुमको मिली है डिबेट. And as for the poor, Mr. Chairman, as for the young, the aspirational, the betrayal is total. I can tell you, I mentioned Manrega earlier, at a time when record numbers of people are seeking work under the scheme, where there has been a 66% increase in work requests under Manrega in December and January, you have slashed on the 1st of February its allocation by 35%. When unemployment levels in the country are at the worst levels ever recorded, how could you do this? How could you do this, Madam Finance Minister, when our young people are looking desperately for work? Your budget has no provisions for job creation or skilling, and you have cut education even while announcing a new education policy. I remember when your government made a lot of noise about a new education policy last year, I congratulated the education minister. I said, wonderful ideas, but are you going to get the money to implement them? How can you possibly head towards 6% of GDP as you are talking about? He said, no, I've spoken to the finance ministry. It's all been agreed in the cabinet. I'll get the money. What did he get? He's got a 6% cut in the education budget. That is the budget we have been given. And the budget talks about 100 new Sainik schools. I must say, existing Sainik schools, I have one in my constituency, the fabled historic Karakotam Sainik School, they are not receiving money from the government. They are in such desperate shape because they've exceeded the capacity of their parents to pay for these schools to run them, and they have been saying, I'm on the governing board of the Sainik School Karakotam, that they may have to close down unless more money is coming. So they are unable to finance the existing Sainik schools, and they're talking about building 100 new ones. What kind of hypocrisy is this, Mr. Chairman? Really? I have to say that this government has a record of coming up with flashy slogans and acronyms. First they came up with Achhe Din, Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas. But any day, any dreams Indians may have for better days or better governance, frankly, have been cremated on the altar of the disastrous decision to demonetize 86% of our currency on the whims of our Prime Minister. To quickly address the economic catastrophe that followed and the rampant feeling of disappointment, they then came up with a slogan of New India, but it was abundantly clear that this was not a new India for all Indians. Instead, the road to this new India seems to be littered with the wreckage of all that was good and noble about the old India. कहाँ तो तय था उजाला हर घर के लिए, कहाँ चिराग मयसर नहीं शहर के लिए. So instead of using the faith that this country placed in the government to deliver effective governance and competent policy making, this government has not only consigned our migrant workers to misery, it has erected spikes and barriers on the path of our annadatas. It has failed them, it has failed us all, it has failed India. मैं आपको कह रहा हूं, भारत की जनता आपसे कहेगी, हजारों ख्वाहिशें ऐसी कि हर ख्वाहिश से दम निकले. बहुत किया एतबार मोदी जी, अब तुम्हारी गली से हम निकले. जय हिंद, मिस्टर चेयरमैन.